Well, I think there's two main ways. The first is through the projects. So one of the big changes I mentioned under the reform is the requirement now to do a procurement strategy for every project. So within that project, you would therefore look at the list of contracts that were to be let and do a market analysis on the market sectors. So through that, you'd look to understand who are the suppliers out there. So if it was a low value, low risk piece of work, you'd probably look at the local sector first. If it was more higher value, higher risk, more specialty work, then you would identify the firms internationally who were capable of doing that and identify which avenues you would target to make sure the market knew of the opportunity so that they could respond properly. So that's the first one. The second is through this external sector engagement program that I talked about. So through that program, we're identifying key market sectors and looking to engage with them outside of the bank's projects to better understand what issues they've got and to better encourage them to participate on bank projects. So I think those are the two main ways. Do you want to add anything?
I think with ADB, there's two distinctions, and one, the projects are either loan and grant financed or TA financed, technical assistance financed. For TA finance projects, ADB staff are the ones that select the consultants. And because our staff are specialists, we have a broader area of expertise. You know, people that have worked in 10, 20, or 30 countries are going to have a bigger network than an executing agency who's basically been waiting to see who comes through the door and offers goods or services. The country is responsible for project loan and grant finance, so mostly implementation consultants. And so then very similar things to what Michael has suggested, knowing the market. Every one of the ADB projects, instead of a procurement strategy, it has a procurement plan. It's basically the same thing. But it's having a better understanding of what's going on in the country, knowing part of ADB's requirement is also to strengthen domestic capacity. So in many cases, it's strengthening domestic consulting capacity. And so for Canadian companies, that would also be getting into the market, know the market, identifying the countries that you'd like to do business with, identifying a good potential local partner, and work with them to strengthen their capacity and technology transfer and everything else. And that's also another vehicle in. When ADB talks about enhanced consulting, how many people have ever tried in the room have worked with the consulting management system and tried to do, yeah. It has its challenges. It is not intuitive. And so for mostly, I think when ADB is talking about enhancing, it's talking about improving its own systems and making it easier for consultants to bid on ADB work. So there's two elements of that as well. And also looking for, I think it's QBCS, is that right? More quality-based consulting, quality-based than pure price-based on consulting selection. Yeah.
I'm feeling left out, so I have to say something too, otherwise I won't get my money out of it. Fundamentally, one thing I wanted to touch on is the technical assistance side and the contracting done by the bank office. Within the IDB group, by the end of this year, from what I understand, they will have finally implemented a series of measures that relate to an overhaul of the policy and practices they use to hire consultancies. It's been a little bit of unofficially, I think a little bit of a Wild West approach, that the different elements within the IDB group have contracted resources. It's been done under a generic corporate procurement policy that is really designed to buy furniture, buy computers, buy large-scale initiatives. So they've been putting into place at the bank group a centralized procurement office to provide advice, training to staff, moving a lot more of the decision-making on those processes out to the field, but it's still not quite in place. And one of the beauties of being part of a large bureaucracy, of course, with separate entities, is on the private sector side, the Inter-American Investment Corporation, they're still determining whether they want to adopt the processes that the bank has developed or if they want to evolve their own. And behind the scenes, there are a whole series of agreements that are being negotiated, internal service level agreements with the corporation. This is thrilling stuff, with the corporation and the bank to basically plot out how that will happen and the costs. One question too, and Shane had brought up is so I'm not a procurement guy, so what does my office do relative to what these fine folks do and did? So we don't make procurement decisions per se in the executive director's office. We're there to fundamentally make decisions on policy that guide how initiatives develop. Also, we make decisions on what loans and investments are approved. But that's done as a collection as the board. In actual impact, if you've got enough borrowing member countries that believe strongly enough in a project for another country, there's very little that we as non-borrowers can do that can shift other than just put on record. For you folks, if you're looking for opportunities, there's little that I can tell you about projects that's not already on the website. We're actually bound by the same code of ethics, same principles that bank staff are and were when it comes to sharing information. I can't tell you anything about projects that are revealed to me. Most of it's confidential, other than what you're going to find on the internet. But if you come to DC, I will very, very happily tell you about some of the context in which bank decisions are occurring, or help to decipher some of the information you're going to find on the web, and some of the areas of priorities that might not leap out. I think as many of our colleagues have pointed out, there's a tremendous amount of information you can find on the websites for these organizations. It just takes a bit of discipline and a bit of time investment to find it. Sorry, see, I can blather for hours if I'm given a microphone. So.
JD, did you have a question?
So I would love to hear from the banks what they feel is a proper expression of interest. It seems it varies from project to project. The importance of the project may vary on the degree of detail you need to provide, but you don't want to throw your name in the hat, and then if you're offered it, you haven't given enough consideration, you pull your name out at the last minute, which has an opportunity cost for the bank, right? They have to invest this time to review. So I would love to hear some guidance on how you engage the process.
Okay, the first would say, don't let the very first engagement you have with the bank be an expression of interest. It's a business, like any other business development. You want to create some relationships. You want to, come to a business opportunities fair, the ADB or similar things by the World Bank, get known out there, and do a bit of market penetration before you throw in an EOI. The chances, if you've never done work for any of the MDBs before, and the first thing that you do is put in an EOI, you're not going to be seen to have the same experience as the guy next door who's done 30 projects. I don't know if, Michael, if you would agree or not. Now, in an expression of interest, also, ADB, and I think this is similar to the other banks, are required to advertise sometimes, I think the minimum is 30 days, sometimes 6 months in advance. So there's a long lead time. The project profile is up there. There's information about the profile, and there's also information, including the project task team leader in the World Bank or the ADB's mission leader responsible for that particular project. Now, I wouldn't suggest you cold call and send out your company profile to 2,500 ADB employees. But if you see a project that you think looks good, or you're looking at a country and you're seeing a number of countries in the country team, then you may want to start phoning, send an email, send some general information, find out more about the project before you throw that EOI in. And again, the more you do business with these banks, the more you'll start to get a sense of how it all works. Now, as a mission leader, when I used to sit there, we would have all sorts of rules that I didn't like, because I'm not a procurement person. I was an energy sector person. But I would have to have geographical distribution, right? So I'd have to find a short list with 5 different countries or something represented from all around the region. I couldn't have just all Canadian companies, especially being Canadian. People would say that that's perhaps, when you're a Canadian, it's hard to actually shortlist Canadian firms because people could say that you're conflicted. So you have to really look very carefully. And then what you're looking for is, do you think these people can do the job? Now, if you can't convince me in 5 or 6 pages that you can do the job, you probably aren't going to be able to write the report that I'm going to need. Right? So it's being able, what information do you need to present to that person in Manila or in a country office or in Washington, D.C. that makes you think, these guys can probably do the job. I've only allowed 5 expressions of interest or 6, so I don't want to waste I don't want to take a risk on asking someone to bid if I don't think that they're going to be able to do the job. So does that help at all? I mean, there's not a magic number. It's more know your country, know your sector, know the people that are doing the work, and then put together a concise expression of interest that says, I can do this work. It's worth you taking the chance on me to write a proposal.
So I think responding to expressions of interest and to bidding opportunities is it's critical to read the requirements and very clearly understand what the question is that's being asked and answer that question. Like far too often, there's additional information provided that's not relevant, or the information that was requested is not provided, or it's incorrectly provided. And with the risk aversion and the compliance mindset that goes with the procurement processes from these banks, they take a very cold view of non-compliance with bids. So I think it's really important to really precisely respond to what the requirements are, no more, no less.
You can informally reach out. Once the name of the mission leader is on the website, you can informally reach out. You can phone them. They're not going to be able to give you information that they wouldn't give to any other bidder, but they can certainly hear a little bit about your company. If you're passing through the region and you wanted to stop by Manila or DC, you could probably meet with these people, find out a little bit more about the project. If you're focusing on a country and the country's actually making the decision, go and meet the executing agency, meet the project manager, get a sense of what the government, what the client is looking for. And a lot of that is best done, and I hate to say informal, because informal implies it's cheating, but in a less formalized fashion than purely through the bidding document itself.